Well, good afternoon if you are in New York City. It is 2 p.m. here. That makes it 11 a.m. in Pomona, California. And it makes it the afternoon and evening in Europe and overnight in parts of Asia and Australia. We have viewers and listeners all over the world. So you know that this is Fred Plotkin on Fridays on IDAGIO, the place where classical music happens. IDAGIO is a video and streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to fans all around the world. And I am thrilled today because I have to just say, in full disclosure, that Carol Vaness has always been one of my favorite singers. It would be, if I attempted to be objective today, it would be embarrassing and ridiculous. So I'm thrilled that Carol Vaness, the great soprano, the wonderful teacher, the fabulous colleague, when I told people I have Carol Vaness joining me today, you could feel the thrill coursing through the internet. And so, Carol, welcome. It's so great to see you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Carol and I are contemporaries, and therefore our careers somewhat overlapped. With the difference that I was a little more in Europe earlier on, and you were in Europe a little later on. But I remember exactly the first time I saw Carol Vaness. I never told you this.
Uh-oh.
You were not singing. I was, although I worked at the Met, I was backstage at the New York State Theater, which was the home of the New York City Opera. I'm guessing this would be early 1980. And I was walking backstage and I saw these two beautiful women seated on the floor, you and Ashley Putnam, and your legs were sort of at a good, healthy exercise position. Both of you seem very fit. And I had never seen opera singers seated on the floor unless the stage direction told them to do that. So already that caught my eye. You two were laughing hysterically, and I didn't want to interrupt and find out what was funny because you didn't know me. So I kept walking, and I was walking with Beverly Sills, and she said, "I love those girls."
Aw,
So my
aw.
first question is, talk about life at the New York City Opera in that era when Beverly Sills was winding down her singing career, was a manager, and in which, and this is the core of the question, most of the productions of repertory that you or Ashley Putnam or other sopranos sang were built on Beverly Sills and had stage direction and costumes and such built on Beverly Sills.
Yes.
Number one, talk about Beverly Sills. And number two, what it's like to be in a production where the person for whom they were made is right there in the theater and she's your boss.
Oh God, come on. All right. So Beverly Hills, then I have to start really at the beginning, which is before City Opera, because it's important to know how I met her. So I was in the Met auditions in
March
1977.
20th, 1977.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So, well, okay, I was very, very young, and not that young actually, and and everything had gone very well in the preliminaries, and it came to the finals, and I lost,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I've lost, but this entire contingency from LA had come to hear me, and literally everybody was very upset. So. Um, Giorgio Tozzi took me and a bunch of people from LA to a restaurant nearby. I can't remember. Iridium wasn't there yet. Maybe it was even the Empire Diner, but I doubt that. But anyway, so we sat and he probably poured me a couple of bottles of red wine by the time we got down to it. And I just don't know why they don't want me. And he was like, it's like, because you're a performer, you're not a contest winner. I said, I am a contest winner. What do you mean? Anyway, so I was a little bit on in that kind of loose mood. So, in great sadness, I go back to my room and I'm sitting there like going, "Oh, I hope I don't throw up." And I had been offered a young artist program, and I think it was might have been just even the second year for Houston Opera in their young artist program, but they wanted me to cover Arabella, sing their American series Tosca, and they had this whole big contract, and I mean, Arabella, me, Tosca, then I had done in English as a grad student. But, what they wanted me to do, it just seemed so very hard. And so I thought, well, I guess that's what I'm going to have to do, go there and wreck my voice. And then I said, nope, Mr. Adler, Kurt Herbert Adler, said to me, if you ever need anything, be in touch with me. And so I'm going to call him up. So I call him up, 415-812-2008, not 812, oh, who cares? Anyway, so, and I say, I want to talk to Maestro Kurt Adler. And they put me right through to him without even asking who I was. So that was cool. And so I said, Maestro Adler, I've called you because I don't know what to do. And it's not like me. I'm kind of chicken. I was really a chicken back then. So if I hadn't had that much alcohol in me, I would not have been able to do it. But I mean, I don't know. I was guided, I guess, and he said, and I said what my thoughts were, how I was afraid of Houston, not afraid of Houston, but afraid of some of the repertoire. And I didn't know anything about being a young artist in anything other than grad school. And so he said, hang up, I call you back. I'm going, okay, okay. So I'm sitting there going, in about 25 minutes, the phone rings at the Empire Hotel, which is where I was staying. And it's Mr. Adler who says, be here February 14th. And I went, really? And he said, yes. And you must thank Beverly Sills. I said, Beverly Sills? I mean, I'm going, you mean the Beverly Sills? The Beverly Sills? And he said, and I said, what? What do you mean? Because Atlantic Richfield had sponsored all of her broadcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Adler went to her for the money for
Yeah.
me for 3 years. And sight unheard, she took me.
Wow.
And so when I arrived, the only thing they had told me that I was going to do was, what was it? Well, Clemenza di Tito. But there was something, wait a minute, there's some, yes, in San Francisco. Clemenza di Tito was later. But anyway, so in San Francisco, they had me be Enrichetta in Puritani
Mm-hmm.
because Beverly and I were about the same height.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, when we got together the first time, I could hardly talk. I was so shocked, just to be in the company of such a famous and wonderful singer and one of my idols. And so more and more and more, we just came to really love each other. And and she, having got to know me, said that she wanted me to go down to LA and sing an audition for Maestro Rudel. He wanted to hear Marriage of Figaro. No, he wanted to hear Tito. He wanted to hear the last story. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I did that. And then he looks at me, he says, are you available tonight to do Marriage of Figaro? And I'm like, no, I only know kind of Dove Sono. So anyway, so from Beverly through Julius, they brought me to the New York City Opera for Clemenza di Tito. The very next thing that happened after I made my debut and sang my 3 performances, because I think that's all we did that season.
Yes. Yeah,
I
sure.
mean, yeah, was it just 3? Yeah, wild, so much work and so wild, but but cool. It was very cool. Okay, I just want to gather my thoughts for a second. So, so I'd made my debut, blah, 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 blah. And the next thing I heard from Beverly is she wanted me to do an audition on the stage for Donna Anna. And I thought, you have to hear me as Donna Anna? You just heard me sing 3 Mozarts. But of course, there's an octave difference between Clemenza, which is low, and Donna Anna, which is high. So I did. And because of that, being in that performance with, I believe it was Sam. It might have been Justino, or Justino was in a later one. I can't quite remember. Um, but it was where I first got my pipes into Donna Anna, not in school, and it seemed to fit me. Ironically, they needed a Donna Anna in Glyndebourne. And they had asked Sir Peter, because John Cox was directing the Don Giovanni that we did with Sam Agostino and Elvira Green. And I can almost remember people. Isn't that scary?
Mhm.
Alan Kayes.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't believe I can remember it. Well, anyway, okay. So, and it was just pretty amazing to be in that kind of a group. I mean, I was just like, but it happened that when Sir Peter came to see the Giovanni, he said,
Would this
I
be Peter Jonas? Is that who you
no, I
mean?
mean Sir Peter Hall from
Oh, Peter
Glyndebourne.
Hall. Okay, got it.
Sorry, I didn't
Okay.
make that clear. Sorry. Um, but yeah, and so we basically, I basically got offered. Sir Peter stayed for, I think, half the show, and then went. And the next thing I knew, I had a contract.
Mhm.
So Beverly was always very encouraging. Whenever I had questions, because I had an interesting situation that kind of ties in with this, which is for my first Traviata of my life. And that was there. We didn't have any stage rehearsal. We only had one with piano, and not even the whole thing. And I didn't have a dress, costume, blah blah blah. And through a series of circumstances, I got sick. But because it was important, my teacher was here. It was a big important role for me, I thought, and I liked it. I loved it a lot,
Mhm.
and it was one of those performances that was a Beverly Sills production. So they were literally so thrilled when I showed up that I could wear her costumes because we were the same height. It's just her waist was smaller and my butt was bigger. So that's part of how that answers that. But anyway, at a point I was too sick to continue. I stopped in after I sang Joir and made plans to sing. And that's when Ashley, who was there as my friend, went on um, to sing. And she said, as long because Beverly came out and said, "You want to be a hero?" She said, "Not if I have to sing Sempre Libera." We all feel that way. And she went on, got great reviews. I got a great applause when I walked off, better than I got for when I sang the whole aria. But that could have been my own nerves and misconceptions. Anyway, Beverly then had made a lot of plans before this for me, and I was to do Anna Bolena, the Stuarda, and Puritani. And um, what happened is that because I mean, I had lots of other things too. I had Professors and Bohème and a new production of Alcina. That one and Merry Wives, I think, were the only new ones I ever did there. The rest were kind of in rep. And
And I adored that Alcina.
oh, me
I
too.
adored it.
Oh,
That
it's
was the
the
first time I had heard that opera. I had the Sutherland recording, but I'd never heard it live. And I
it's
think
so
that was my
beautiful.
first full Carol Vaness performance, and
Was it? Was
that's
it?
what did it for me. Yeah.
Well, and I can tell you right up there for one of the nights came in Joan Sutherland and Bonning, and they sat in it's not really a box, but kind of the front of the box section, and it was so funny because I think it wasn't Joe. Was it Joe? One of the guys said, "Hey, Carol, Carol, you never guess who's in the audience." I'm like, "Who cares who's in the audience?" He said, "Joan Sutherland." I went, "Oh shit, are you kidding me?" Going, "Oh no, oh no." I went, "Oh well, wait, okay, have wand, has to sing. So grow up and just sing." And I have to say, it was a wonderful thing. But basically, because of the trouble I had in Traviata, she was concerned that I might have trouble with Anna Bolena. So she wanted me to keep Puritani but dump Anna Bolena. Well, in effect, Bolena is way more my kind of style because my voice is,
Elena's lies lower. I
it
remember that
lies
Joan
lower.
did that because it was in the right place in her voice at that time.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And, but she thought I could do Puritani. And I was, I'm going, well, wait a minute. Puritani is way harder. So many chromatic things and all kinds of stuff that it's not that I didn't want to sing it. I've always wanted to sing it, but basically to pull it out in a production that was already old. And again, as you said, in Beverly's costumes, which were no problem for me for the aforementioned things. Um, I just said, I went to her and I sat down and I said, Beverly, I don't think I should do either of these. And she said, okay, it's all right. We're dumping the Maria Stuarda anyway. They did the Maria Stuarda later, I think, with, what was, Olivia Stapp,
Olivia
Barry
Stapp, yes.
McCauley.
Yes.
Wow. So anyway, those were the days. So what was it like? There was never a dull moment. You never knew what was going to happen. I was told, though, that when I stopped in Joe before Sempre Libera, that was the first time that they had ever had to close the curtain in the history of the theater. That because before the act was over, they just closed it. And the really kind of, it was a little mean, but not mean. The tenor who was making his debut at the theater with me was John Garrison.
Mm-hmm.
And he was off in like kind of one of the side areas, where he could still sing because he was a little nervous. He's out there singing. And we did the duet already and he was, just making sure his voice stayed high. And so he all of a sudden realized, I don't hear anything. I missed the aria. And he freaked out. He was going, oh no. And so he came out and he's going, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm going, I didn't sing it, John. It's okay. Don't worry about it. So anyway, yeah, those were the days. And
well, I have a specific question. For listeners who don't know, we had many glorious opera companies in New York. The two most famous were the Metropolitan, of course, founded in 1883, and the New York City Opera, founded in 1943 by Mayor LaGuardia. And Julius Rudel, the conductor, was with the company almost from the beginning. And back in March, on March 5th, I had Anthony Rudel, Julius's son, on to talk about Julius. It would have been Julius's 100th birthday on March 6th.
oh my
And so
God.
you can go back and see all about the history of City Opera and Julius. But he was the conductor, music director. Beverly was the first major soprano star, and Norman Traegle, the bass star. And a lot of what was built and done for City Opera was built around them, plus a whole generation of artists, including a young Placido Domingo, Federico von Stade, Carol Vaness, Jose Carreras, many, 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 Catherine Malfitano, of the great stars who then went to the Met and elsewhere, began at New York City Opera. And
Yeah.
it was a wonderful laboratory, but they always were inches away from bankruptcy and struggled and so on. And Beverly had a golden touch for raising money and kept the company going that way. And it was a wonderful thing that lasted a long time. It then folded for board reasons. They tried to bring it back in a different form, and we hope that it succeeds now. But that was a golden age for New York City Opera, and you were part of that. But Beverly always said to me that the acoustics in this theater are not very good, and there's a sweet spot on the stage. And to put it bluntly, all the stage direction was such that Beverly had the sweet spot. And I met other artists, and I'll ask you now, who took on roles that she did, who were directed to that spot, not knowing necessarily that it was the best for sound. But many City Opera productions were strange because, if I remember, it was sort of downstage a little to the left. And that, I kept wondering, why does Beverly Sills always stand in the same spot, until she told me years later. Did you experience the stage direction, or did you know why you were in that spot all the time?
No, I had no idea actually.
Okay.
This is the first time anybody ever said anything,
Yeah.
but it's totally interesting. Totally interesting. But that time for me was a time where as I got older and I got more experienced and blah blah blah, I had more to say about where I felt I should go. But when I first got to the City Opera, it's not that I didn't have stage chops. I certainly knew some things, but I could always, in one way or another, even if I didn't agree with it, I could always make something work. So, yeah, I think, are you sure it wasn't a little bit to the right, though?
Might have been, but
The left from the audience looking
left in
at
the
the stage.
audience.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
which
Uh-huh.
is stage right. Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
yes,
So,
yes.
well, anyway, so that I mean, basically, I had so many people that were like assistants. I mean, we did do, I think Tito Capobianco came for the Hoffman, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
And with Hoffman, I only did Antonia, and with Justino also. Um, was it Ricky Leach? Maybe no. Was it Ricky Leach already by then?
I
I
don't
can't
think so.
remember.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think so.
I only sang one of them. If I
Yeah.
sing three of them, I remember who sang it. But with just one, forget it. I come late, I go have dinner after. But yeah, I mean, it was a wonderful place to work, honestly, and in terms of, I just was always very nervous. The one place in the City Opera, well, in that theater, was that was complete hell. The voice wrecker was room 2 in the basement. And that's where you had many, many musicals. The reason it was not good is it was not too big, but really live.
Hmm.
And we'd get in there and just sing. Oh, it feels so good. Ah, and we'd just be screaming our heads off. And the next day, we're walking around talking like that. So that was that. The other two rooms were not that great for acoustic, but I have to say, the State Theater, the bad acoustic, made me pay attention to what I was doing and not try to listen to what I was doing. I just thought, well, I'm gonna sing, and that served me my whole career, the bad acoustic, because I wasn't trying to always listen to it. I was trying to make sure that I was staying with the action, staying with my full body singing, and so that I could, and also making the character, blah blah blah, and singing well. And I think, yeah, I loved my time there.
Oh, yeah. I should tell listeners why the acoustics were bad, because people would wonder. The New York State Theater was built both for the New York City Opera and the New York City Ballet. And the New York City Ballet was headed by George Balanchine, and he was much loved by Lincoln Kirsten, who was part of the whole Lincoln Center scene. And the New York State Theater was different from the others. It opened in 1964 as a gift from New York State to New York City for the World's Fair. And the large public space out front was called the Grand Promenade, and it had two huge statues by Ellie Nadelman that were originally the size of a little statue on a piano, but made huge. Philip Johnson was the architect. And the Grand Promenade was the official receiving room for the city of New York, and it had 8 million little beads in its curtains, one for each citizen of New York City. So there's a whole backstory that everyone
Wow.
else but me has forgotten. Mr. Balanchine did not want dancers' footfalls to be heard when they danced. He wanted it completely silent. And he prevailed to have the acoustic deadened, so to speak, so
Thanks.
that when dancers would land, you wouldn't hear anything. And same in that rehearsal room, that it was for dancers, frankly, not
Wow.
for singers.
Interesting.
The
Makes
City
sense.
Opera was a poor cousin, so to speak, and didn't have the clout that George Balanchine had. You remind me of the Lucia that was done in that period, the Beverly was still doing, and I forget who the tenor was. It might have been Barry McCauley, but I'm not sure. But
Ricky Di Giuseppe, I think.
Ricky Di Giuseppe, you're right. And well, I remember very well that Beverly stood in the sweet spot for the mad scene. She didn't move much. She just stood right there for 18 minutes of the mad scene and then dropped over, and they carried her out. And then we moved to the final scene at the tomb. And Ricky Di Giuseppe was standing in the very same spot because the tenor
Oh
has two
no.
solos at the end because he wanted to sound good after the bad scene. And he didn't budge from that spot either.
Oh my
It, New
gosh.
York City Opera staging was very particular for that reason because
Wow.
people were vying for that spot, and it belonged
Well,
to Beverly when she was in the show, and then to the Sopranos who took over her roles.
of
But
course.
then you moved over to the Met, and I by then was working at the Met for a few years and was super enthusiastic about the opera Rinaldo. It was the first Handel opera to be done at the Met. The Met has now caught up well and can do more, but it proved that it could be done. And it was conducted by Mario Bernardi, and it was a Toronto production built around basically Marilyn Horne. And it had a wonderful cast. It had a young bass making his debut named Samuel Ramey, who brought the house down. A lot of people that you and I knew, Donna Raffanti, Diane Kesling, and so on, were in it. And you were in two of the performances, if I recall,
I
where
was cover
Ava
Armide.
Podvesh, right, for Armida.
Yeah.
So I
Hmm.
remember that I saw Carol Vaness as another Armida at City Opera. And I was working there, so I could stand in the wings and watch you. Now I'm telling you, and was blown away by your performance. Blown,
Wow.
blown,
No,
blown away. And you sang it twice, and I thought, I hope she's coming back. And I went to talk to people, and I found out that indeed you were coming back for La Clemenza di Tito, which in the Jean-Pierre Pinel production, conducted by James Levine, co-starring, though not at the first performance, but co-starring Tatiana Troyanos. You and Tatiana, when I think of pairings of singers who have just done everything for me in performance, great individually, but the combustion, the chemistry, whatever you want to call it, of you and Tatiana Troyanos, where she was playing Sesto, who's a young man, and you are Vitellia, who you have your designs on Rome, you have your designs on Sesto just to use him to get Rome. And
that's
if
right.
you dump Sesto and get Titus, good. If Berenice has to be sent away, okay. Servilia, everybody get them out of the way because Miss Vitellia's in town.
He wants to be queen. I want to be the empress.
And talk to me if you would, because it's my favorite Met production of a Mozart opera. It
Really? Oh, it's hilarious
it
too.
grew with my hearing it, with talking to Levine about it, who really taught me the opera. It became my favorite Mozart opera. And you are, to me, the exponent. I've seen many wonderful Vitellias, but to me, Carol Vaness and Vitellia is, Joan Sutherland and Lucia. It's the same thing. And so,
I think Vitalia's easier than Lucia, though. I think it's very generous of you, but
oh, but I mean, I'm talking now as an expert, not as a Carol Vaness fan. I'm
okay.
talking as someone who knows the business. And it's just, if you have seen it, heard it, experienced it, especially with Tatiana Troyanos, who gave as good as she got, just tell me anything from that experience of that production and the role, and Tatiana and Levine and whatever you want.
Okay. So, in the first production of that Clemenza, I was the second cast. The first cast was Renata Scotto. And I believe,
No Shrinking Violet either.
no, I know really, but I think it's in my mind that Tatiana did them all. I think that's what was right.
You
I
mean
may
with
not be on,
Scotto?
huh?
When Scotto was in it, she
Yes.
missed
Didn't she?
one.
Sorry?
She missed one.
Oh yeah, the first
Yeah.
one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, but and I have to say what made it different for me because I'd already done Clemenza di Tito, didn't love the role so much. I thought the recits were crap and blah blah blah. When we did it City Opera, we just slashed. But at the Met, they had Renata Scotto. Now, not that Mozart is her perfect thing, but I was blown away by how she used the recits and how things all of a sudden I'm going, I'd never thought of that. And I was like just going, I'm going to memorize this. I mean, I had to be there anyway, but I just was like, I'm going to take all this in so that the language itself of these stilted Süssmeyer, I think they are, recits, they're not Da Ponte, of course, but I mean, but they're still so amazing. They're just amazing the way we were doing it then. I don't think I really even rehearsed with Tatiana. I'm not quite sure about that. I might have had one, if even. And so I wasn't aware that she came to the stage quite late. Not late, she wasn't going to be late, but so we were preset in a bed in the center, kind of slightly up of the stage. And I'm supposed to lay there in this bed, and I'm going, I hear ba 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 ba, and I hear the end of the overture coming. I see the curtain behind the scrim come up, and I go, oh shit, I do not know her recits. I hope she comes. And a second, as the scrim started up, she was right there.
Yep.
And I was going, but it scared me.
Yep.
And so I got mad, not because I was mad, but because when I get scared, I get mad. And so it was no stress to go, ma che sempre lo stesso sesto. And I was like, blah, blah, blah. And I just think she was kind of going, oh, calm down, But it was basically some of the most fun I ever had.
Yeah.
I loved singing with her. I sang it with her many, many times there. If you didn't keep up, she could bury you. And not because she was out there to bury you. It's just her charisma taught me how I needed to be when on stage with someone like that. I'm a great competitor. I'm an ambitious competitor. I love competing healthily, not I'm better than you. I don't believe that, not ever. My kind of competition is I want to feel that good. I want to feel that good as she makes me feel when I see her do it. Didn't take long because I'm a Leo and I kind of get out there anyway. And
happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, 69. Can you believe it? How depressing. All right. No, I don't care. I don't care. I'm still alive. That's the miracle.
Yes.
But anyway, so there was one time when we were opening the show and we had a great first performance. Great. It was like great reviews. It was me and Tatiana. Not quite sure who else because, I kind of focused on that. And I was out. It was in January, February, something like that. There was a lot of snow, a lot of ice. I broke my foot.
I remember.
I broke my foot. And I call up and I say, hi, Jonathan, it's Carol. I broke my foot. I can't do the show. He's saying, well, okay, I'm going to tell Jimmy. But I'm going, you can tell Jimmy, I'm telling you, I can't do the show. My foot's broken. I can't walk anywhere, And so he calls me about 4:30 then. And I'm thinking the whole thing's a done deal. The cover is on. I'm really sorry, Catherine, but blah, blah, blah. So he calls me back and he says, we'd like you to come down and sing it. I said, what are you talking about? I said, my hair's dirty. How am I going to come down and sing it? He said, well, because your cover is sick. Catherine Boulin, and she was literally throwing up. And so she was the only one who knew the staging besides me. So they put me in the down left entrance up the stairs where I sat with my foot up in a cast and with my white dress on. And I was like
from the costume.
Yes, in costume.
Yep. Carol, just so I was in the wings about 6 feet behind you for that whole performance. Yeah. It was January of 1987.
There you go. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it was funny because I'm watching this whole thing and I'm going, wow, this is quite an interesting show. You know, because now I'm watching what Vitalia does. I'm just singing it. And then I got to say, it's some of the best singing I ever did because I thought, well, I've got this cast on, you know. I thought you're going to have to concentrate because I couldn't take any pain medications and sing because it just made me loopy. And so I just sat there and looked at Jimmy and hoped everybody was watching,
Yeah.
you know, what was going on. But it was funny because everybody who went past me with the paniers on, they'd come through and this big thing of dust had come over. I'm going, oh, come on. I don't know if you remember that. And
I do.
I mean, it was
At
really,
that time, the Met had spritzers that would put mist down on the stage, but there's only
yeah,
one intermission there.
yeah,
And
that's
the
right.
set is a unit set.
Yeah,
So it's
so what
not
are
that
you
we're
gonna
moving things.
do?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can only do what you can. You know, I mean, I've been way worse places, to tell you the truth, you know,
Well,
for dirt and dust.
what I did then was I went from backstage because I had the house doctor there just in case for both of you. And then when I knew that he was in place, I went up to the company box, which is in the grand tier house. I should know this by now. House right, stage left, and watched you from there. And what was very interesting was you didn't look happy. Let's put it that way. You were not the bright Carol Vaness we knew from onstage performing, and yet you sang beautifully, but also at a certain point, your face started reflecting the emotions of the character, not right away. I think once you felt secure that you were singing well, then you began to act with your face.
Well, you know, um, the truth is that I had never done anything like this before, and I didn't want to distract from the facial expressions of the girl doing Vitalia. It wasn't that I was afraid of my voice or anything. It really was more that I just didn't want, you know, it's like I want people to hear me and I want her to do it, but I don't want to draw a ton of attention. But after a while, you can't help it. You know, you get
Yeah.
in the drama just because you've done it so many times.
I want to talk to you specifically about Jean Pierre Ponel in that production. I know that Levine and Ponel really understood each other artistically and had a great synergy. And what Ponel created with that production, which by the way, the scenery was basically the same as the Domeneo.
Yes.
And a few
Yeah.
changes were made from
Yeah.
Greece to Rome and
Some
Neptune and
shells and seaweed.
that's it. And the Electra or the Vitalia, your character, had a red wig almost always,
Red
and
like this
red
for
like that.
yes, and or red, beautiful long, kind of
Mm-hmm.
Venetian auburn, and a beautiful white wig. I have a great picture.
Did
Beautiful
they ever
white.
tell you why the red wig?
No.
Okay, I don't know either. I just always wondered. But the second thing specifically about the Tito production is I've seen several magnificently directed productions in my years. I've worked with stage directors, especially Giorgio Streller, but also Pizzi and Zeffirelli and others, where I learned from the masters. There was something about the stage direction of this production that I think to me was just flawless because Ponel, the opera was written in the 1791, and he used examples of drawings by Piranesi, which was from a little before. And the costumes were very 18th century for the most part, but 18th century evoking ancient Rome. And therefore, we were going through a prism. We were going from our time to Mozart's time and then to Rome, not from New York to Rome nonstop. And Ponel had a geography and a mathematics almost about his stage direction in that opera more than anything else. There was a circle, there were steps, and it played like a Roman amphitheater. And all of you moved at angles and in directions and interactions and so on, which can look very schematic, except it looked perfectly natural with these performers. And when the production has been revived, Ponel sadly died quite a few years ago,
Yeah.
and people have been handed the production book. I refer to it as being a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, which is not to criticize the people who had to remount it, but the original rationality and the original brilliance of it. I'm going to give one example of it was Tatiana. At the moment with the downbeat in the very last scene where Titus extends his finger indicating Sesto must come, Tatiana shot out of the wings as if from a cannon. She didn't walk on. Now they sort of walk on very sadly. It's as if she were shot onto the stage. And it was
Mm-hmm.
so shocking because she went from being the noble Sesto to rags and handcuffs,
Yeah.
chains. And the image combined with the downbeat and the music was just so shocking every single time that all the members of the cast in character and all of us in the audience, if we were paying attention, were blown away by a moment that normally just passes in most productions. Did you, how much did you work actually with Pinnell and what did you learn from him and just anything about Jean-Pierre Pinnell?
Um, Jean-Pierre and I worked uh, the first time where I was first cast in Notte di Figaro.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I attended all the rehearsals they were doing, the difference between sitting and watching and listening, pretty much I was very blessed and lucky to have Renata doing what she did because she's so specific, and Tatiana being there because her energy is unstoppable.
Yeah.
She just has, so you can always see what's going on. So I actually didn't work with him a ton. The
Mm-hmm.
first time, I mean, the first time he even saw me do any of it, he came to a run through, and I was surprised. I didn't think he was going to come. And so he watched me, and he only had a few things to say. You don't have to move into this slowly. Don't make it look good. What we need is the impetus, we need the energy. And I don't know, as a consequence, I really feel that those kind of accents, it's not that they make it shorter, the opera, but in your mind, there's so much action. There's so much happening. Even though if you think about it, in Idomeneo, when we all take Decesiscum and everybody takes one step down, then we take another step down. But it's how you take the step that's important. And I, at least that was what I got, especially from Figaro.
Yeah.
As simple as when the count, when I say non son rea, and the count says valego il volto, and he picked his hand up like valego il volto, boom, and I fell down. But that was so choreographed. But then when done with energy, it worked fantastically. I've never enjoyed many productions. I mean, there are some things I love, 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 but those Mozarts like that with Pinnell were outstanding. Loved, loved them.
I think as you talk about it, there's a difference, obviously, between La Clemenza di Tito and Le Nozze di Figaro. Tito, though a shorter opera, significantly shorter, um, the pace feels slower,
Yes.
whereas much of Le Nozze di Figaro is rapid fire, both in the recitativi, but also in the action, especially Act Two, but a bit everywhere. But
Hmm.
things happen in nanoseconds in Act Two. It's a 40-minute
And
express
believe
train.
me, all of those zillions of things were not left to chance.
Mm-hmm.
They were part of a great big beautiful painting that started out with the outline, and then we put the first coat and indicated where figures go, and then the next thing you know, you're putting this here and this there, and by the time you're done, you have this incredible gorgeous painting that has depths
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, I watch it. I watched it like once or twice in my life because I don't really, I watch some things I do, but Figaro. But watching it, things that look so natural were planned.
Yeah.
There wasn't left to, no, you have to do this. This is how you see the note that he's asking Figaro, the count's asking, you do this, you do that, you come here, you do that. It was really, really, it was fun too. It
Mm-hmm.
took some of the nerves out of it. Nothing could take the nerves out of Dove Sono, though, for me. Not my
No?
favorite way no, it's just a little, and I did okay with it. I know people really, really liked Figaro. I just have to say, I'm kind of a high Mozart soprano. I do have low in my voice, and I have low voice, but my voice likes to sit just a little bit higher, like more like Donna Anna or Electra, you know. I mean, so I don't know.
And yet, this is my professional opinion, you are a fabulous Fiordiligi with all of her low notes.
Oh yeah, no, I have low notes. It's not that I
Yes.
don't. But it's not low notes. It's not that they're low or high. Fiordiligi sits here in the ensembles from just under the passaggio to above it. Her aria goes goes over it just continuously, except with the triplets, the comascoglio. The last aria is like you might as well be a tenor, you know. And
That's going
as
to be the title of your memoir, Carol. You might as well be a tenor.
might as well be a tenor. But anyway, and it's with Figaro sitting up here and Fiordiligi doing this, I can do this all day long. But basically, if you look at the ensembles, Fiordiligi is very, very high. It's just A after B flat. And I love that. That always felt good to me. Dove
Mhm.
sono, and this is the thing, and this is how I don't know what Mozart thought, but for me, I interpreted that aria as being because it's an uncomfortable place in the voice to sing. It's just uncomfortable to stay there. Not uncomfortable to sing, but uncomfortable to just stay there all night long. It makes it more human.
Mhm.
Pardon me, I have allergies today.
Okay, then I'm going to talk.
Mm.
Um, in Le Nozze di Figaro, I was very involved in that production. We're not going to go into the backstory of that production, but there were artists such as Frederica von Stade, and she was on my show back in December. She was my New Year's Eve guest, and she told a very funny story about Ruggiero Raimondi, who was also in the cast, who liked to woo her. And she spoke about the Met was on tour in Minneapolis, and it was very
Oh yeah.
hotel and so on. And he would stand under her window in her hotel room singing De Vieni alla finestra.
Oh my gosh.
And I got to work with Ruggiero a lot in Italy, and Ruggiero taught me how to make bolognese meat sauce ragu. And
Oh.
in my cookbook, it's actually, and I attribute it to him, of course, it's his recipe. And a marvelous actor.
A marvelous actor and a great colleague and a real pro.
Mm-hmm.
When you were working, it's not that it wasn't fun. We would laugh
Yeah.
but when we were working, it was working.
I think
Simple
he's
as
one of those
that.
people like Tatiana who raises everyone's game.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
much so.
Yeah.
Well,
Which
for one
makes him
thing, that
exciting to work with. And he is fun. And
he's
also in the
you know
cast, another
what?
of my favorites, and Mr. Allen, if you're listening, I want you on the show, is Thomas Allen, um, who played the Count to your Countess.
The perfect, perfect, perfect character, perfect recitatives, perfect acting style. It's uncanny. I mean, as the Count, he is every single thing. He's loving, he's forgiving, he's hateful, he's jealous, he's it's just astounding. I think he's one of the best singing actors in the world.
I agree.
And I
He's
always
actually coming back to the Met, God willing, and pandemic willing, in March for Ariadne of Naxos.
oh, as the music
Yes.
player or
Yep.
great.
And I had the great honor and thrill to work with him in the summer of 2012 at the Verbier Festival, where he and I and Thomas Kwastoff and Ilyana Kotrubash, how's that for a foursome?
Wow, what a good
Were
group.
leading master classes. And thankfully, our classes never overlapped. So I got to go to everyone else's class. And the opera was Le Nozze di Figaro. And Contrebass had a very different approach to approaching a role than did Thomas Allen. And he was fascinating the way he could get shy, intimidated young artists, very talented, but they were with Ileana Contrebass and Thomas Allen, to really blossom. And talk about that, if you would, about Thomas Allen and teaching. But then I'm gonna fast forward to what you're doing now, and then we're going back to some of your other work.
Sure, sure.
I know from everybody who has ever come across you in Indiana University, where you teach, you're a professor of voice, that Miss Vaness is a fabulous teacher. And I hear that a lot. I wouldn't say it if I didn't hear it a lot. I hear it all the time. And he's a fabulous teacher, Thomas Allen.
Yeah.
What does it take? I mean, you have been very explicit now in explaining everything that we've been talking about. But for example, you use the word passaggio, which I know your students, we hope, would know, but not necessarily. Do you find yourself defining passaggio just so they know? How does that work in communicating this intangible thing?
Well, basically, I don't ever talk about it unless it's a problem. If it's not a problem, don't make it a problem. I think the most important thing, I mean, the students that I teach are all grad students. I used to teach undergrads, and it wasn't so much talking to them. I just felt that I wasn't as good at it as I was as helping grad students. And I think it's important. I think if you're a creative artist and you watch people and you see, because I can read reactions just as you can, as Tom can, is that actually paying attention so that you see it, so that you know, like I can see a student and hear it, of course, a little bit in the voice anyway, but see if somebody's scared. And my tactic, it's not really a tactic. I'm just kind of a funny person, I like to laugh. And so I get them to laugh. And eventually if I have people that are emotional, I say, you just got to get logical. Just get logical. You have to pay attention. It's athleticism, and it has its patterns in each voice. I, for one, don't believe in teaching everybody by a method. Not at all. I teach every individual voice with what is the most beautiful part of that voice. And I think that my teacher, who was David Scott at Cal State Northridge, who's been gone many years now, he had an ear. And I think one of the things I was blessed with is that I had one too. He just, in teaching me and helping me, because there was a moment of crisis in my career when I heard a vocal cord and who knows what was going to happen. And I had to rebuild my voice from zero, literally. It only took a month, but it was the longest month of my life. And this is in the beginning when I was singing Julius Caesar at the Spring Opera Theater in San Francisco. No longer, they don't do it anymore. But I put my voice back together inch by inch. And when you do that, you have to pay attention to things. I started to listen to recordings of things that I had, and I thought, now what did I do there? And my teacher helped me also pay attention to what I was listening to. And then over the years, the more great singers, I mean, think of the people I've been so darn blessed. I mean, Luciano, a voice lesson.
We'll get to Luciano.
Oh, okay. Well, but all of those people, I mean, watching, I think for absolute sure, my acting took a gigantic step because of Pinnell and Tom. Absolutely 1000%. And so with young singers, I don't address problems unless there are problems. And again, I mean, you have to help people be comfortable. There are people you cannot help. And in this 15 going on 16, starting and on the 23rd, of August, I will start my 16th year here. which I can't even believe. I'm going, really? Really? I'm not singing tomorrow? No, you're not, thank God. But yeah, it's like I've gotten better and better and better at identifying things, basically because I've been practicing for
Mhm.
16 years to be a good teacher.
Yep.
I don't think I was destructive when I first started. I certainly had done a lot of master classes, but worked with so many great people that passing on, Alain with Muti and Levine, just things they would say, you know, that would be so incredibly helpful. So I feel like I'm this collection of gifts that I've gotten from, all the incredible people that I've sung with over the years and worked with, and great directors and conductors, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that is what I love to do. I love doing it. I don't find teaching a drag. I think
Mhm.
there's some people actually do, but I just feel like I have all these things. And since I can't take them with me when I die, I would like you all to know all these things because they're so incredible and so amazing.
Well, Carol, one of the reasons that I began this series for IDAGIO, Fred Plotkin on Fridays, is because, as I said, you and I are the same generation, and we've worked with so many of these people, and we began young. My first opera job, I was 16 at the Lyric Opera of Chicago. So
Oh, mine was
that's
not.
not yesterday. And
No.
so I was trained by artist Kranick, the general director there, and got to work with artists, Tito Gobi, people like that, and study with Tito Gobi and Herman Pry, who I know you worked with in Fledermaus, I
Later,
think,
Mouse, my favorite.
Holy Fledermaus. And these people taught us, and we were young and we were sponges and we absorbed. And sadly, and I noticed this more in ballet first in the AIDS generation, how many people we lost, but just in general, life moves on. And I feel that part of my mission, and I see it, you do it incredibly well, is to pass on what we know. And so I do that in part by documenting conversations such as this one, and you do it with your wonderful teaching. And yes, believe me, I've heard from many, many young artists that you are a fabulous teacher. So I want to ask you, there are many people I can ask you about, but sticking to Handel, no, I'm not even going there. Sticking to Handel, you worked with Jon Vickers,
Oh yeah.
and you
But
play
wait,
the, yes.
never mind about Handel. My first opera I did with him, I learned in 2 days. I was in Fort Worth and I was singing Donna Anna in English.
Oh.
And I get a call from my manager and he said, "Want to make your Paris debut?" I said, "Yes, of course." He said, "Do you want to sing Pagliacci?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know it." And he said, "Could you learn it?" I said, "Yeah, yeah, I can learn, no problem." I said, "Like when?" He said, "Well, you need to be there Tuesday, so you have to leave Monday." It was Friday afternoon, and I had a performance. I had a Friday night performance and a Saturday matinee. I called up my dear friend Warren Jones, one of the most incredible coaches in the world,
He
and
is,
pants
yeah.
and everything. And he basically said, "Yeah, I think you can do it." I said, "Will you come?" And I said, "I'll pay your airfare. Just come. Can you teach it to me?" He said, "Yep." So he came, and the day of the Friday, it didn't do any work, but after the performance on Saturday, went through Neda, and they basically. Not something happened. Malafitano had canceled, and Vickers refused to do it with anyone who had done it before. Oh, I don't know. And so, yeah. So I flew on Monday in the plane going, walked into the first rehearsal on Tuesday, and I'm like, so, and Jon Vickers to me and to the whole world, the legend of legends. Unbelievable. But my teacher when I was in grad school, David, took me to San Francisco Opera to hear him do Peter Grimes. I was like this. Was Heather Harper.
Yeah.
Brent Ellis? No. Could be, maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, so it was just one of those things I'm like going, so I couldn't believe I walked into the Paris Opera. I had no idea where I was going. I'd never been in Paris. I was staying at the Grand Hotel. Why? I don't know. It was right next door. That's all I knew about it. And he walks up to me and he looks up at me because he had to look up because I was tall. He said,
Yeah.
"Huh, you're awfully tall." I said, "Mr. Vickers, I just want to tell you, you are the most, I love your singing. I've loved, and my teacher is coming because he loves your singing." And then he was like, okay, okay. Well, do you know this role? I said, yeah, I know it. He said, but you've not done it before. I said, no, I didn't do it before. And then I proceeded to learn how to deal with one of the strongest personalities of all time, to the point where he really would lose himself a little bit.
Yes.
He had a switchblade, and one day one of the performances, I'm standing there and I hear and I turn around and he's standing there with this switchblade, and there's a little rivulet of blood running down his cheek, and he's looking at me like this. I'm going, ah. So I run off like a crazy person. Then there was one of the performances, he's saying, "No, pagliaccio, no son," and he grabs me, came over and spread his legs, reached between, lifted me up, because I was lying on the ground like this, because he had already thrown me once. Came over, put his hands kind of like here, not really around my neck, just, and he lifted me up, not too far off the ground, but at least that far, at least a foot. And then after the high note, and then right before ma vision on the song, he just went, "Bah," and dropped me and walked away. And the chorus men were so freaked out. They came, "Oh," I'm going, no, it's okay, don't worry about it, I'm fine. But boy, was I mad. I was mad. But anyway, so it was incredible. So I'm sorry, yes, Samson.
Well, actually, I want to ask you now that we're on Pagliacci. Do you think that he wanted a soprano who had never done Netta before, so that the shock value in performance, and I don't mean of his being Jon Vickers, but what Canio does to Netta, would be that much stronger because you'd react not having been rehearsed, but in effect reacting to what was going
no,
on?
no, I went to the first day of rehearsals. We rehearsed for 3 weeks.
Oh, 3 weeks. Okay. But
Yeah,
still,
no, it wasn't just a walk on. I think he basically didn't want anyone coming in with an alternative idea. He pretty much was strong-minded in that way. He had his way and he wanted to do it that way. Now, mind you, a legend. So, I mean, okay, fine. Whatever you want to do is fine. And I would tell him that, John, whatever you want. But we had Juan Pons and Gino Quilico. So it wasn't like we had just, nobodies. Everybody they were big singers, important singers, young, of course, me too. But it was an incredible experience, I have to say. Yeah.
So now Jon Vickers in Samson, which is an oratorio by Handel, and you sang the Israelite woman and the Philistine woman, and you have the big show-stopping number.
And in London, I sang all three.
Well, who was the third woman?
Oh, no, in London.
Yes.
Because I did it twice in London. The first time I only did Delilah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
The second time they brought it back was with Robert Tier, and I did all three parts. Well, there's the Israelite woman and the Philistine woman. Philistine and the Israelite. So you have Let the Bright Seraphim and oh well. Can't think of it. It's gone. Sorry. Yeah, but then and Delilah. So yeah, we had Leona Mitchell as Delilah, and I was both. I was the beginning and end. Let the Bright.
I was a good friend of Elijah Moshinsky, who died of COVID in January.
I'm so sad about that.
Elijah was going to be on this program, and I got his birthday was in January. And as you know, I remember people's birthdays. And I got in touch with him, and he would always answer, and he didn't answer. And it concerned me. And then I started tracking people down, and I discovered that he was about to die of COVID. And this is all the sadness we're going to do on this show. But I thought he was a brilliant director. And I would like to know the experience you had of working with him. I believe you also did Otello with him. Is that possible? Yeah. And certainly Samson, because very different kind of director from Ponell or Zeffirelli.
Yeah. Well, for me, Elijah was, I liked him very much too. He was more, he certainly did opera, and he had his ideas. And if you had an idea, he would absolutely entertain it. Um, to me, he was more like, he was not like Sir Peter Hall or Trevor Nunn or Andrew Sinclair, any of those people. But there still was that kind of a theater mind to him that was interesting to me. Um, I thought the Otello was a great experience. Basically, for the Israelite woman and the Philistine woman, all you do is walk on, sing your aria, flap your fan, and leave. In London, when we worked, when I was doing
That's the subtitle of your memoir.
Oh, what?
It should have been a tenor. Just flap your fan and leave.
Flap the fan and leave. So, so there was this point where I'm sitting there and we're staging the aria, and John is in those big old chains and he's standing there. And I never thought about it, but Elijah comes over and sits down. We're just taking a break, and he says, "So, does it bother you that every time you sing that John rattles the chains?" I said, "He's rattling the chains?" They said, "Yes." I said, "I didn't even notice it." He said, "Oh, well, because if it's bothering you, I'll tell him to stop it." And I thought, "Oh, I wouldn't tell Jon Vickers to do anything. Stop that." Oh, where's my switchblade? But yes, I enjoyed working with him very much, actually. Unfortunately, at the beginning of Otello, there was only me because Placido was a couple weeks late, or at least a week late, and Gergiev was not there. And do we even have, we might have had Leiferkus, but I don't even think we had him. So because I was living in New York, I was the only person there. So poor Elijah, every single day we did the whole final scene, the aria.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, he's like, "Are you getting tired of this yet?" And I said, "Well, I hope not. We have a lot of performances.
But
So,
that production, Otello, really, really worked out. I point out to people because everyone has a foggy memory of the Otellos at the Met. Domingo sang it for a lot of years. And people remember all the Desdemonas, Teresa Zilisgara and Kira Dekanowa, who stepped in for Teresa Stratas and then came back and did it later, and Renee Fleming and so on. But it was Carol Vaness who did the new production.
yes.
And so it was built on you. I always tell people that because they somehow, in the blur of all the Desdemonas with Placido, almost always, people don't remember the genesis of it. So it's interesting when you remark that most of the cast was not there. I remember very well working on rehearsals where we would only have one artist, and it might be Amelia.
I know, poor Amelia. What's her name?
Jean Kraft.
No, not Jean Kraft. It was Jane.
Jane Bonnell.
Yeah,
Jane Bonnell
what
was in the original production. It's true.
We had a lot of fun.
So I don't read reviews to artists, but I'm going to make an exception, just a section of a review from 1990. It was a cast that had Carol Vaness, Jerry Hadley, Tatiana Troianos as Dorabella, Thomas Hampson, Betsy Norton, and Richard Van Ellen, conducted by James Levine, of a production of Così fan tutte at the Met. And the writer wrote, Così fan tutte was extremely beautiful. Margaret Price had canceled, and we had Carol Vaness between Rosalinda's as our Fiordiligi. In her Fach, which centers on Mozart, Vaness is already one of the great sopranos of our time. I tell my children boastfully that I heard Callas and Tebaldi in their prime, and that they will tell the world 35 years from now that they heard Carol Vaness. Her sister was Tatiana Troyanos, who delightfully shrugged off her normal gravity to be flirtatious as Dorabella. These are two of our most intelligent singing artists, and both are famously good colleagues. Their rather similar voices blended just exquisitely. So, do you have any dispute with any of that, by the way, just for starters?
Who wrote that review? Can you say?
Martin Mayer in Opera UK. Martin Mayer.
That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny though. There was one from Martin Bernheimer, who I adored. I
Yeah.
adored. I mean, he was so funny, but also so hard on people. He
Yeah.
basically said that kind of the same thing, except for that my roulades were a little bit rusty, which you always remember that kind of thing. But no, I don't have any dispute with it. Of course,
Yeah.
the difference in singing Dorabella, I mean, singing Fiordiligi opposite Tatiana Troyanos is a lot different than singing it opposite Suzanne Menser, for example.
Yes. Yeah.
Who was also wonderful. But with Tatiana, it was like, we do all those things in thirds together. I'm
Mhm.
going, man, I'm going, wow, I'm really having to put out here. I'm going, whoa, this is high. My voice is, I'm going, hey, I haven't ever been this tired at this point. But then you have to understand,
Yeah.
it was in between Rosalinda's, and I had worked my tushy off on the German.
Right.
And on that part, even though I don't like it, but if you're going to give it to me, I'm going to do it right. And and when Jimmy called me to ask me if I would help them out and take over from from
Margaret
Margaret.
Price. Yeah.
Yeah. I said, well, I'm going sure, and it's not that I didn't remember. I mean, I'd done the production before anyway. So anyway, make a long story longer, it was an incredible, not feat. I don't mean to say that I did an incredible feat. What I mean to say is that I was so happy to find out I could do it, that I really, at that point, still, I mean, that I still was not tired. I wasn't tired in my head. And I really didn't have to rehearse Così. It just went boom, 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 boom in my head. I didn't, because that's one of my talents too.
Yep.
Is I have a memory like yours. It's like, except for some, I can't remember people. but recitatives, come on, So yeah, I mean, it was incredible. I loved singing with Jerry Hadley. Loved it.
Yes.
It was always
Much missed.
always an
Yeah.
incredible emotional beauty. It was like, who doesn't want to listen to someone sing that beautifully?
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I was blessed that they asked me, and lucky I
Yeah.
could do it.
Yeah. And I was thrilled to get to hear it. I had tickets anyway, obviously, but I'm always happy to hear you. I was interested in Margaret Price because we don't get to hear her very often, didn't in New York, but obviously that was an excellent substitution. And what Mayer wrote about the way you and Tatiana vocally, but also theatrically interacted was very funny. It's just something like Guarda Sorella, which often can just pass through, was like watching Lucy and Ethel in I Love Lucy.
Well, see, the thing was, when it came to things like that, I took my cue from her. So I mean, I tried to lead some of the things in thirds. I tried, because normally the soprano leads, but I wasn't leading.
Right.
We were singing together. Neither of us was leading, but and so that was very different. But just the amount of energy. I mean, and I just the whole production. I'm sitting there. I'm going, I didn't even know she could be funny. I didn't even know she
Oh
could laugh
yeah,
that much. I didn't even know she could flirt that much. But, well, because, I didn't know her outside of the theater. So, it was a
I did.
wonderful way.
I
Did you?
did.
It was a
Yeah,
wonderful way to get to know her.
yeah. Because it's not telling stories out of school to say that she was very nearsighted, and
Yeah.
therefore, sometimes there would be these comical events that would happen, and I bonded with her in different ways because of her nearsightedness. I'm not nearsighted, but for example, in Tannhäuser in Act Three, in Venus, in the wonderful Gunther Schneider Siebsen Otto Schenk production,
Yeah,
she had to be
beautiful.
high on a platform and she had to sing out as Tannhäuser ultimately opts for Elizabeth over Venus. And she leaned in, and she was a tall, strong woman, not heavy, but strong. And I had to stand behind her and hold her back. And she would turn around and she put her hand on my face. Oh, there you are. Because she was so overwrought with emotion that she didn't know where I was, and it was dark in the theater. Um, and one time, and this is enough of the Tatiana stories, a very famous soprano discovered that Tatiana didn't have any place to go for Thanksgiving. And I offered to come over to the soprano's house and cook Thanksgiving for Tatiana and everyone else there, not too many people. And I was in the kitchen most of the time. And Tatiana said, "Oh, the soprano's name, this food is really delicious. You must have hired a wonderful cook. How did you find someone? Where is he?" "Oh, he's in the kitchen, Tatiana." And Tatiana came into the kitchen. I said, "Hello, Tatiana." And she looked at me, not wearing glasses, and she said, "Oh, well, we've never met. I'm Tatiana Troyanos." And I said, "Well, I was holding your waist 2 days ago in Tannhäuser."
Oh, that's
um,
a
I I have a very general question because this could fill 72 hours, but what did you learn from James Levine?
okay. My experience with James Levine came through Warren Jones. And because I coached a lot with him in New York before I was going to the Met. And it had to do with the Clemenza di Tito, actually, not the first time. I was the second cast. And I was just sitting there watching, I'm watching, and it all's going wonderfully and blah, 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 blah. And there's a break, and Warren comes up to me and he says, "No, Carol," because he's my friend. "Don't ever be behind. Jimmy hates people who schlep." He said, "So just go." And I did. I didn't, and because I hadn't really been acting a ton on the stage. I hadn't been out in the theater with that. So those kind of things are learning. But I just went, nope, I'm singing ahead. I'm just going to be there. What I learned is that if a conductor trusts you, he will let you do almost anything. Jimmy had a way of knowing vocally. For example, in Così, this is just even the last Così, which, the new production, which were my final Cosìs, actually.
With Cecilia Bartoli as Despina.
Oh, was she in the show?
I gather that's what I read. She pulled the scenery onto the stage, if I recall.
Oh, well, anything with a harpsichord, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, yeah, she was, of course, of course. Um, and there's this place in the finale, Disperati tosicati te diavoltanti, and it's little, and it's not that I didn't think he could really hear, but at a point I started going Disperati tosicati and I started to just outline the chords. And so Jimmy comes back after the first act and he says, "Carol," I said, "Yeah." He said, "I want you to drill those notes." I said, "What notes?" He said, "Those notes." "Oh," I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, sing them slow, but sing all of them, okay?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry." I said, "Oh, okay, I will." And so then, of course, I mean, and I wasn't afraid of Jimmy, not ever, you know. I
Mhm.
thought he was incredible musically. He showed me how some music goes just by, and he also taught me how to pay attention. And I don't mean to stare at a conductor, but rather that if he trusted you, I didn't have to stare. He gave me a lot of things in terms of I don't think you have to go that harsh with this Don Elvira. You can make her blah, 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 blah. I mean, musical things, but mostly they were in action
Yeah.
things, you know, where I don't know, he could just round off a phrase and it's like the last Toscas of
Which we're
Luciano.
going to get to in a couple of minutes. I
Okay.
had the great privilege from about 1984, early 85, until probably 2005 or six, that every 2 or 3 months I could visit with, I called him Jimmy Levine, um, with the specific purpose of talking about an opera, a role, a symphony,
Mhm.
music, the theater, whatever. I think he understood that I was one of those people who would hear and learn from him and be able to pass on what he taught me. And so I had that great privilege, and it was remarkable because he really structured my way of listening, hearing, and so on. My favorite conductor of all times who I worked with, but even not, was Claudio Botto. But Levine was an extraordinary conductor and an amazing teacher. And I think that he was responsive to people who responded to him. And I don't mean played up to him. I
Oh
mean,
no, I
who
know
really
exactly.
listened and understood that his time was valuable. And that if he wanted to sit down with me and talk about Moses and Aaron, there must be a good reason for that. Even if I was not ready for Moses and Aaron, but he felt I should learn this now. Um, the only opera where I never quite made headway was Pelléas Melisande, but that's just me, that's not him. But
Hmm.
he taught me Electra, he taught me Clemenza, he taught me Ariadne of Naxos, he taught me so many operas.
Yeah.
And that's an honor. And before we get to the big man, I want to talk to you about just one other man who I adored, who you sang with the Manon, was Alfredo Kraus. And routinely, I'm asked usually 3 times a week, who's the best of the three tenors? Was it Domingo Carreras or Pavarotti? I would always answer Alfredo Kraus. And I said that to Domingo Carreras and Pavarotti, and they said, "You're right." He was an extraordinary singer, artist, in his way, actor, although it was a different kind of acting in his way, but it was certainly acting.
Of
He
course.
acted with Sutherland. He acted with these artists, all of whom were very different. I saw him with Adita Gruberova. I saw his what turned out to be his last ever performance, which was Werther in Berlin. We didn't know that, but it was his last performance. And he was, to me, remarkable. And I would like to know your experience of working with him, but also you were a young and still rising artist, what you learned from him.
Uh, the value of stillness.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I tell people that, for example, after you sing Adieu notre petite table, then he comes in and sings La Rêve, you know. And so basically, we just sat there and he held my hand and he sang. He didn't make all these weird voice faces. He didn't, you know, overact. He didn't underact. He
Mm-hmm.
just basically was right there in the moment. And hence then it facilitated the audience. It like drew them in like this.
Yeah.
And I think that in today's world, we have to be very cautious because I think stage directors often distract audiences. Like directors who have people running all over Kingdom Come for no discernible reason. You know, just
Mm-hmm.
and I mean in the Pinnell production, it also is kind of crazy, but it certainly was a hell of a lot of fun. Now you understand, I didn't have a ton of rehearsal. I had rehearsal, of course, but not a ton with Alfredo. I we did some room things, but he came late, which is fine. I had already worked with Manuel Rosenthal, so I did Manuel with
How
him.
old was Rosenthal by then? He must have been past 90.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
old.
that also is quite remarkable too.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he I still to this day, when I'm teaching kids how to do it, I said, you have to understand that this is Massenet. The conductor is going to direct the orchestra, at least we hope, is going to direct the orchestra so that you don't have to worry about fitting in. That because, if you wait for the orchestra waits for the singer, then it just becomes, sluggish. So he had a wonderful way of keeping things moving, except for the opening night for me and Alfredo.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a problem for me because I I didn't have to sing the big aria, Affrier. But
Mhm.
by the time we got there, I think Maestro Rosenthal was probably tired, being older. But anyway, when we got there, he after it's not the sensu piece. It was when he sang the Rev. He went so slow, and Alfredo, not being young, started to get nervous. I mean, you could even hear it in his voice a little bit, and I hadn't experienced ever hearing that because I saw him do Daughter of the Regiment, where he was in the back of the stage and ran forward, jumped on the prompter's box, and sang the last high C, so okay, which was incredible. Um, but when we walked off, um, after the Saint-Sulpice, we went to the Saint-Sulpice, he was strangely distant. And but we all have our thing. I didn't think, oh, it must be me. Maybe I smell funny. Oh, maybe it's this. Maybe it's that. Well, it had been he wasn't happy with. He thought he had not performed well in the aria. And so when we walked off, and they sent him on. What's this? One of the guys sent him on for a solo call, and I looked at the stage and I said, "Excuse me, we don't have a solo call here." And they said, "Oh well, we're concerned because the maestro was so slow." And I'm going, "No, no." I said, "He can have his solo call, but there's two of us here that just worked this whole act, and I'm just as tired." So anyway, make a long story short, it all worked out fine. He got a solo call, I got a solo call, and and Maestro Rosenthal perked up a little bit, and it all worked out fine in the long run. But yeah, it's funny because I really never ever even sat down to talk with him because of how the rehearsals were run. It's like, and he's an elegant man.
Oh yeah.
Very.
Um, so I remembered that I did have another question from an hour ago before we get to our friend Luciano. I want to be mindful of your time. You are welcome to stay, but I also want to be mindful of your time. Um, you were talking just now about having people run all over the stage. And I can think of two productions, namely the Clemenza di Tito, but also the Zeffirelli Don Giovanni, which I always felt was very underrated compared to a lot of the other Zeffirellis where everything was very opulent. Here he tried to do it as done in Prague in 1787, and there was a lot of manual movement of the scenery and so on. I liked that production because it was not, A Thousand Oranges and Carmen, that kind of stuff. And you as Vitalia in Tito, and as I believe it was Anna, it could be Elvira, Anna.
No, I didn't.
Um,
I didn't sing Elvira until I'd already sung Anna a gazillion times.
oh,
And
because Carita Matula was Elvira in
yes,
that
and
production.
one of the times that I was supposed to sing Elvira, Sharon Sweet took ill,
Mm-hmm.
and they called me, and I switched parts midstream. They
Wow.
said, "You want to come down and run through it?" I'm going, "No." I said, "I remember where I went." I'm going, it's not going to be a great no me dear, so don't yell at me. So
Um,
go
but
ahead.
what those two productions had in common was Miss Vaness had a very wide dress of the era. And therefore, I remember that you had a handkerchief in Anna and you were holding it. And in the other hand, you could gesture with that hand. But if you turned, it would be like a propeller that would turn. And
Well, the difference is the
yeah,
one I had um, was kind of like a cone. It came in, but then with the cape and the this and the that, the whole thing came down in a cone, and there was this big, of course, you know, whatever you call them, like hoops, but more serious than a hoop, big and yes, you had to move, you had to remember, but you could still do it. I mean, I still gestured. You could see me in a Don Ottavio so morto, I'm gesturing all over. But I have never, since I did Don Giovanni with Peter Hall and Glyndebourne, ever had trouble not moving.
well, I
I
guess that's the point I want to get to is I don't think that the great opera singers have to move constantly. I think that you can, and there are times when you do, but the stillness that you were talking about with Alfredo Kraus sometimes was just his preference, but sometimes it's imposed by the costuming. And your Vitellia and your Donna Anna, in their relative stillness because of the costuming, were remarkably expressive because, frankly, we in the audience focused on you and not on the staging.
well the
And when your hand would move a bit, it meant something.
well I remember the thing is that with Clemenza, we had two dresses, Renata and I. There's the white Fortuny pleat one, which was very easy to move in. That was no problem at all. The other one, which is that black one with the paniers, was very different from Electra, for example, or Donna Anna, in that the panier came out like this, then came in. So actually, we did move more than I did in Giovanni. The Clemenza did move a little bit more, but you still had to be careful. What was really hard was Manon coming into the
Yeah.
Transylvanie with, and that was as far as my hands could go, which is almost 6 foot. So
Yeah.
it was big.
And now to a topic that we share and love. Regular listeners know that I and Luciano Pavarotti were close friends for 29 years. And I loved him very, very much as a friend, apart from being the great artist that he was. And we spoke about everything. And I kept things secret that he wanted to be secret, and I will never reveal those things. But one thing that is really not a secret is that he really loved you a
Mm,
lot,
it was
and
my
not just as a performer, not just everything on the stage, but he loved you for you. And when it came time for him to make his farewell to opera, which he did at the Met with Tosca, he insisted that it be you as his Tosca. And Sam Raimi was Scarpia and James Levine conducted. And it was in March of 2004. And he would die sooner thereafter than ever we expected.
yeah.
And he was nervous. I can tell you that because I was right there.
We got sick
And
the
I was
first.
cooking for him, and it was a very emotional experience. And a couple of years before he was supposed to do his farewell, and he got sick, and they brought in another artist, Salvatore Licitra, and the New York Post was very cruel to him. And I think the Met, in some ways, could have been kinder to him than they were. When he was genuinely suffering, he was not someone who canceled. He was not whimsical and arbitrary that way. So that it only created more nerves for him when he finally did get to come back in 2004 for 3 performances only of Tosca with you and Sam and Paul Plishka and James Courtney and Charles Anthony, who was a brilliant Met colleague who sang more performances than anyone else, and Leroy Lara. It was a lovely Met cast. And but Luciano was he told me this very explicit that if he was going to retire, it had to be with Carol Vaness's Tosca.
Uh,
Tell me about that. I mean, I
well,
understand why, but you tell me the experience.
okay, so this experience happened at the beginning of my career. when I was a young artist in San Francisco, and even though we weren't really covers, they had us cover people. Only for not that we would go on, but blah blah blah. And so I get a call one afternoon it said, "Listen, tomorrow, can we need you because Miss Caballé cannot be at the rehearsal for Act One." And I'm like, wait a minute, whoa. And they're like, "Can you be there?" And I said, "Well, I can be there, but I'm gonna have to carry the score." I said, "I haven't had a single coaching on it." So Paolo Peloso was then conducting that, met me for like an hour and said, "Don't worry, you'll be fine." And I'm going, "No, I won't. It's not memorized." And that's Luciano Pavarotti and Giuseppe Taddei. And so I go and I dutifully go. I'm standing there going, oh God, please help me, please help me, please help me. And we get to the point, and I go, "Mario, Mario, Mario." He said, "Son qui." And he opens the door and says, "Ma tu non sei Caballé." And I said, "No, I'm Carol. Nice to meet you." And so fast forward to the first Toscas I did with when I was really skinny with him and Cheryl Milnes and Jimmy Levine. And we're in, I just had gotten real skinny for a couple of years and I felt really good. So I had on this really short red leather skirt and a black turtleneck sweater, blah, blah, blah. And there were lots of pauses, and Luciano is sitting down. We're all sitting there, and and so the break comes, and I walked over and I said, "Luciano, I don't know if you remember me." He said, "Si, I remember you. You are not Caballé." And I was like, that had been 25, 30 years. I mean, it was just like, it was the 70s, and we're in the not 2000s yet.
Yeah.
It was in the 90s, but that was a long time.
Yeah.
And he
He
remembered
had
exactly
nicknames for people he liked, of course. And Caballé was guapa, which means Spanish for pretty or beautiful or whatever. And he would say, "Buenos dias, guapa." And she would say, "Oh, excuse me." And she would shake the proverbial fan, even if she didn't have it. And they were lovely together to watch.
Oh, yeah.
And you were La Vanessa.
Yeah, that's what he called me. It's
Yeah.
true.
And but always you could hear it in his voice that the voice would get even sweeter than it already was in talking about you, because he, unlike just, not to a degree anyone else approaches, his voice would reflect his mood. And I mean his speaking voice, not his singing voice. So that I always knew exactly what he felt by the colors in the speaking voice, which was a remarkable thing. And because he was from Modena, where they prolong the vowel La Vanessa, and the extra length in the letter E was a loving little expression in there. It was very particular. And then he would do both S's and add the A to make it, feminine. And he was very sense oriented. And his touch was very particular. Obviously, his sense of smell and taste were highly developed. But his hearing was wonderful. His vision was good. And he was always very much in the moment.
Oh,
so
yes.
When we talk about singers who maybe didn't move that much, I never cared in regard to him.
Me either. Me either. We had so much fun, many different occasions of Toscas at the Met, and one some in Glyndebourne, and just a bunch of stuff like that. And at one point he'd never done it before. We're in the middle of the duet, and I go, "Ma falle gli occhi neri," and I said, I turned around, and he goes, whack, right on what would be my butt. It was covered with this big old dress. And I was like, I turned around and went, "Oh." And everybody laughed hysterically. I'm going, because I just reacted like Carol. I didn't mean to go, hey, but it was so funny. I love that moment so much. You have no idea.
I saw him give a few whacks to different artists, but always people he liked. I want to make that
Yes,
very
of course.
clear. It was not, I mean, I hope it wouldn't be perceived as an abusive thing, but it was sort of in character
Oh,
of
he was
being what the Italians call spiritoso. You appeared in Ron Howard's film documentary about
oh,
him that I helped work on.
oh yeah.
And I want people to go see that. It's called Pavarotti, because I felt that they really did a very fine job of expressing the man that I knew and that you knew.
I
It
just
was,
cried the whole time.
yeah, I know. He was not known in the public because I don't think he did much to cultivate an image that wasn't him. He just was himself.
Yes, of course.
And that's part of what I loved. Do you want to talk about the last three performances and the emotions and the experiences, or do you want to keep that to yourself?
I think for the moment I could tell you over a glass of wine, but I think I'd rather keep it to myself. I mean,
Okay, I'll
the
buy.
the that I can tell you are the first one was a lot of fun. Okay, we didn't rehearse a lot, but we did meet, and Levine was there, and he was singing, I was singing, Sam was singing. But the second he had gotten sick between the first and second performances, but and as you already stated, he felt like he just had to go on. And basically, I started to get sick too, having been with him, the performance before and the rehearsals. And I'm going, this cannot happen to me. This cannot. And it got to the point, though, for me. I mean, I felt like the last one would be the most important, regardless of how any of us sound. So I decided that I wasn't going to sing the last act. And so they brought the other gal in and she sang, all fine. But between Act Two and Three, Luciano wanted to, because I'd said, I just want to say thank you so much and I'll see you, blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, no, I see you in Act Three. Come here, come here. So he gets me, okay, this is fun. You'll like this. Nothing sad about this. We go in. He says, okay. He looks around and here's a big fruit cake, a green fruit cake. And he gets a piece of it, takes a napkin, puts it in there, says, here, eat this. And then he takes me by the hand. He opens the door to the bathroom that has a hot shower on. And he gives me, and he says, go eat this. Just a few minutes, you'll feel everything fine. I'm like, so and I'm in costume.
I was going to ask, were you in costume and makeup? Yeah.
Holding this fruitcake going, what am I going to do with this fruitcake? Because I didn't want to eat it. And I sat there for a while. I'm going, has it been long enough? Has it been long enough? And then I thought, oh, shit, what am I going to? I said, I can't flush it down the toilet because if I do, you won't believe that I didn't eat it. So I took it like this and went, smash. And then I made it into a little ball and I put it in my bra. And I was like, so I came out and I said, Luciano, I love you. I love you. And he said, okay, okay. See you soon. And then after that, then I went home. And I know that he probably was upset, but he was worried about me.
Yeah, he was.
The
I
next
was with him. I know. Yeah.
the next morning,
Yeah.
I got 64 red roses. You probably ordered those too.
He
I
did.
was, oh, you did.
Yeah.
Oh, I was like, oh my God. And so I don't know who I called. I said, will somebody please tell Luciano I'm definitely going to be there? I don't want him to be scared or worried or anything. I'll be there regardless of what happens. And of course, he didn't feel good the
Right.
last show. But, you know, none of us did. I would have been so sad because it was his last anyway.
It was a very emotional evening. The Italians have a term emozionato, which is different from emotional. It
Yes.
means where you are so moved by the emotions and the feelings surrounding an event that sometimes it inhibits you from fulfilling, but other times it makes you bring forth things, positive things that you otherwise could not have released. And there was all of that emozionato in the last performance. And Sam Raimi was really good and strong, and it was quite the night. And it was sad, but also it was the end of his opera career right there, and we knew it.
And the thing is that I don't know if you know this or not, but in Barcelona, I had been injured about 4 months before the performances of the Toscas. I was injured, and I had to be flown back to the United States, and I went to California where I had the bottom from L3 to S1, I had them fused.
Hmm.
So I had major back surgery, and the reason I had it was because I was losing feeling in my legs. And I said to the doctor, I said, so what's my option? And he said, well, you can wait, in about 4 or 5 months, it might be better. I'm like going, no, no, no. I have to be on the stage of the Met in just over 4 months. And I'm going, he said, well, I said, do you think I'd be able? He said, well, what do you have to do in this Tosca? Because he didn't know anything about opera. I said, well, I have to run up some stairs and I have to jump off a parapet. And he said,
And you have to wrestle with a bass and murder him.
and that, but I said, yeah, jump off, do. And so basically he said, oh, okay. So I have a picture, which I'll take a picture of and send it to you, of me, my back surgeon, his wife, and Luciano,
Mm.
because they came. And I have to say, I spent 4 months in brutal rehab.
Mm.
The first month you don't do any rehab, but after that I was walking. I was walking 5 miles a day. I would have physical therapy 3, 4 times a week. I got to where I could run up 2 stories
Mm.
super fast, run up another platform, get to a platform, jump off. And I could
Wow.
do that without any problem. Now, it doesn't mean that things didn't hurt, but it did. So the only time that I had trouble was when they gave Charlie Anthony that lifetime achievement award.
That was
And
on March 6th. That was the first of the three. Yeah.
yes, that's right. And the only thing that was hard was that Luciano, I said to somebody, I said, will you please go get Luciano a stool? Because Joe Volpe was coming out, people were going to talk. I'm going, he's not going to want to stand here.
No.
And I couldn't get anybody to do it. And so he just he had his arm on me. And my back is going, ow, ow. So the picture of me with Luciano, I'm kind of concentrating, going, don't show how much this hurts. Don't show. And he didn't do it on purpose.
No.
And I
But
wasn't going to tell him. He
for
had enough.
listeners to know, Luciano late in his career, because he had back problems and so on, he was tall. He was about 6'3", had a stool, and he would often be on the stage, but lean on the stool that kind of looked like he was standing, but he was not. So when
Yes.
he was painting in Act 1, he was actually leaning on the stool. And even in Act 3, when he sings E lucevano le stelle, leaning on a stool, which was fine. So, Carol, it must have been different when you said to him in Act 3, "Oh, Mario, non ti muovere, don't move."
Because he was still moving.
Yeah, I know.
And
Yeah.
the thing is that, he wanted to do what he could, which was to fall down, but he couldn't really fall down. So
Right.
he had kind of clutched himself and grabbed things. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
No.
but for me, then he did it a little bit too late. So, oh, Mario,
Mhm.
non ti muovere. Like, stop moving. And I tried to play it like that, but you're behind the scrim and you do
Yeah.
what you. But it was always, I can't even believe that I was so lucky to be able to sing with him and know him and laugh with him and eat with him,
Yeah, sure.
and smash his, his fruit
Fruit
cake.
cake in your breast.
I'll just hide it in here. I'll never know.
um,
Uh,
Carol gave listeners wonderful music to hear. I learned that I had left off the Fantasia on a theme by Thomas Tallis, conducted by Sir John Barbaroli, which you can find on Adagio. But I'm just going to go through them, Carol. The Kindertotenlieder with Christa Ludwig, which I imagine awakened you to what the voice can do. The famous Don Carlo, conducted by Riccardo Muti at La Scala, 1992, with Luciano doing his only Don Carlo. It was controversial. I thought he was terrific, and he brought things to the role that no one
I
else did.
think it's ridiculous that people made a big deal out of what was basically a flip or a crack, if you want to say.
He
But it's
cracked the
not
note.
like he cracked it and got on. He kept holding it. So I don't care what
Vladimir
they.
Horowitz missed notes on the piano, but nobody would say, "Gee, he's missing a note." And the Turandot with Luciano, Sutherland, and Guapa with Cavalier, conducted by Zubin Mehta, who I thought really was a
Isn't that it?
fabulous. Yep,
It's unbelievable.
it's phenomenal conducting. And Sam Raimi as Attila, and Maria Callas, yes, and Christa Ludwig and Franco Corelli and Norma. And I added every Carol Vaness listing on Idagio. Carol, I love you. That's all I can
Thank
say.
you, Fred.
Thank you
Thank you
for
so much.
everything you have given everyone and continue to do so as a teacher.
Oh,
Um, that's all I can say. This was memorable, and
it's
I
wonderful to see you and talk and get to know you.
somewhat, because you and I, we were both sort of busy in our ways, and
Of course.
the few needs that you had were not needs that I would be called on to fulfill. And you were
Oh,
a very self-sustaining artist, and I had my hands full with other people.
of course.
So,
Well, it's
so
been a
I got, frankly, I got to admire you from very close, but without some of the Sturm und Drang that accompanied some of my work with other people,
I'm
which
so
only raised you further in my estimation, because you were a great, great colleague and a marvelous artist and still are. So thank you. Be
thank you.
well.
Thank you.
See
I'll
you
do
soon.
my
I'm buying that wine so we can talk about
best. Let's do
it.
it. I'm
Two
ready.
bottles. Apparently, it takes two bottles, is what you told us. So I'll get two bottles.
No problem for me.